Maps, a cornerstone of military operations everywhere. And that's because how else are you going to know where any of your stuff is at? Also important is acknowledging that maps and the terrain analysis associated with them account for 3 of the 4 steps of IPB or IPOE. 1, identify the operational environment. 2, identify the effects of the operational environment on you and the adversary. 3, skip. 4, determine enemy courses of action in the operational environment. So maps are critical, maps are essential. But we should all understand some of the foundational tenets and principles of maps and the information that goes with them before we just start throwing maps around willy-nilly and putting icons anywhere and everywhere. Now, a disclaimer here is, of course, we as all source intelligence analysts, 35 Foxes, are not the cornerstone, the pillar of mapping in the community. That belongs to your geospatial section with terrain engineers, 12 Yankees, 125 Deltas, and imagery analysts and technicians, 35 Golfs and 350 Golfs. So let's look at some of the key things up front that you should have on all of your maps or be prepared with. Let me see here. We're going to need CIB DTED land cover, road maps, infrastructure, points and polygons. You're going to need a TLM map, a JOG-G map, a JOG-A map, a TPC map that can host PLI, OPSPOS, NSITs, graphic control measures, and all those other standard things. Hello and welcome. I'm your host Garrett, and this is 35 Fox Talks. Clearly, with all of those maps and map data layers, we're going to need both analog and digital maps to be successful. Our starting point for all things foundational mapping, analog and digital, is the Defense Logistics Agency. Now, before anyone in the know has a brain aneurysm, let me explain why this is the starting point. Yes, it's true that the National Geospatial Agency, NGA, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers obtain and/or purchase all this information and builds all of these products. But after these foundational products are built, they are made available to Army units in digital and print formats via the DLA. So if you are an Army unit without a direct support geospatial shop, this is where you can obtain a lot of the foundational map data and information about what each map dataset does. Also, as a side note here, the DLA is where your unit supply obtains printed maps for all vehicles and command posts in your unit. Your unit geospatial cell doesn't produce maps for the unit, they do terrain analysis for battles. You get pre-existing printed map sheets from supply, who gets them with a purchase card from your installation DLA warehouse. Anyway, with tangents complete, let's carry on. Here we see the table of contents for maps that support standard Army ground maneuvers. The first one of note is the Topographic line map, TLM 1 to 25,000 scale. This map provides the most detail of TLM maps regarding terrain features and is the most prolifically used in the Army because it supports battalion and below operations, often showing enough terrain on one map sheet to plan out crew serve weapons engagements. To see an example of a 1 to 25,000 map, you can go to any Army geospatial shop or any Army mapping system. For those of us on the outside of these systems, we can go to places like mytopo.com and pull up publicly available examples like ones from US Topological Maps, Explorer Maps, and custom MGRS UTM lat-long maps. Now, clicking over to an old Yakima Training Center map, we can see its dimensions are 7.5 minutes north-south and 7.5 minutes east-west, which is roughly 14 by 14 kilometers. We can also see how zoomed into the terrain it feels and the detail that exists across the map, which is required for small unit planning and battle tracking. A scale size up for brigade operations is the TLM 1 to 50,000 scale. Covering an area roughly 30 by 35 kilometers, it allows for a better view of howitzer-based artillery support planning and a greater consideration of the depth of friendly and enemy operations. We can see here the scale in the upper left, the map sheet name in the center, the originating organization of the predecessor to the NGA called the National Intelligence and Mapping Agency, NIMA, the series number, and the map sheet number. Oops! Due to the jumpiness of the zoom insert, we can see the legends and declination diagram at the bottom. And With another random jump, we can see the southern side of Yakima has transitioned from marking individual buildings in the 1 to 25,000 scale to generalizing urban areas and highlighting only big buildings here in the 1 to 50,000. Continuing on, we come to the TLM 1 to 100,000 scale, which is optimized for the old division and corps level of air-land battle operations. It is great for planning tactical actions by multiple brigades and battalions, along with the fires and air support they'll need. Now, unfortunately, I can't show you an example here because the one version of YTC I could find at this scale was all washed out, and most of the 1 to 100,000 scale MGRS maps are specifically made for military applications and come with CUI, FOUO, or LIMDIS classifications and caveats, so you'll have to consult your Mission Command Systems and GEOINT cell to see one. Jumping up in scale from 1 to 100,000 operational level maps, we immediately enter the world of aeronautical products. Here we can see all of the different map types you can nab. The Army typically uses the Joint Operations Graphics JOG maps at 1 to 250,000 scale, the Tactical Pilot Chart TPC maps that are 1 to 500,000 scale, and the Operational Navigation Charts ONC at 1 to a million scale. Occasionally, Army personnel in joint planning teams will use the Global Navigation Charts, GNCs, but those are large segments of the world, so a lot of big hand-waving happens on those maps. Okay, first up we have the ubiquitous Joint Force Planning and Battle Tracking map category, the JOG-A for air-centric activities and JOG-G for ground-centric activities. Now, to show you an example, we must go to a whole different website, chartsandmaps.com. From the home page, we navigate to Aeronautical Charts, select the JOG map for the area we want, and then through the magic of editing, we skip past me having a pop-up window error and see how large of an area a JOG map covers. These maps are often used by UAV units and, of course, our much-beloved combat aviation brigades. So, if you're a Battalion S2 and using this map, you should know that if you put a man-pad platoon icon on the map, the icon will take up more terrain than the actual platoon on the ground. The type of enemy icons that should be on this type of map are not the hordes of mechanized companies or soft teams. It is things that can shoot very far like close-range and short-range ballistic missiles and can impact flight corridors like air defense units, their sensor ranges, and engagement ranges. The use of these maps for ground maneuver planning is something like big icon little map stuff like a corps planning the movement of multiple divisions. Also, key to note is all the coordinates are latitude and longitude, so you'll have to get savvy on a coordinate converter and how to plot hours, minutes, and seconds on this map. Stepping up from the JOG maps, we have the TPC maps, which support mid to high altitude aircraft operations. And no, the marker of F-16A does not mean this is for an F-16 fighter. It's the UTM section designation. Anyway, these maps can cover entire countries. I mean, to have a TPC map that covers YTC, it also has to show the Seattle-Tacoma metro area, Portland, Oregon, and Spokane, Washington, which borders Idaho. For most Army units, these maps are only useful in showing large terrain features and country borders. ONC maps and GNC maps are at such a scale that you might as well launch Google Maps and Google Earth as your start point. I mean, these things are for theater planning and theater battle tracking and wallpaper. Now that we've covered all the basic military map types, here are the basic digital map layers and files you should have. CADRG maps are simply military maps that have been scanned into an ESRI ArcGIS program and georectified to their coordinates on the ground in a file format called a raster. Controlled Image Base, or CIB, is simply unclassified imagery stitched together and georectified to its actual location on the ground. It is controlled because it is an attempt at ensuring all users have the same imagery of a location across multiple command posts. CIB 1 through 10 refers to the resolution of an image. A CIB 1 layer has images good enough to differentiate two objects from each other if they are a meter, 3 feet, or more apart. CIB 10 means any objects closer than 10 meters cannot be told apart. So in effect, housing developments just become blobs of nearly unidentifiable structures. CIB version 2 and enhanced CIB gets more accurate to geolocations with clearer images. Digital Terrain Elevation Data, or DTED, is critical to understanding hills, slopes, valleys, building heights, the elevation of things. So when you are making digital coups and makus, you need DTED. Most of the time when you as a 35 Fox are viewing DTED data, it has been processed and rendered into a grayscale or green scale of elevations that add a 3D look to maps. Again, the number on the back matters. DTED 0 means there are elevation checks every 1,000 meters for those ONC and TPC type maps, which sounds good until it clicks within you that what that means is the elevation of a location is only verified once every grid square. So whole valleys, hills, houses, streams, etc. can be missed, and it all looks like a solid, smooth mountain slope. DTED 2 sounds much better at every 30 meters, but remember when you're doing tactical level planning, a change of 3 feet of elevation every 10 meters or so can mean a trench, battle position, a slight hill, sudden embankment, and broken intervisibility lines or lines of sight. All to say, the more important it is that you understand how the elevation of the ground changes, the higher you need that DTED number. Not shown on here are things like land cover data to highlight swamps, forests, cities, farmland, tundra, etc., and hydrology data to show dams, lakes, streams, and all of that other stuff. Now, all of this data is typically compiled, maintained, and enriched by your units supporting GEOINT, shop, or sell. So if you want more information and more accurate information, make sure you go do some cross-training with them. With regards to what we are going to do next with terrain analysis in 35 Fox Talks, we need to introduce you to the simulation games Armored Brigade 2 and Gunner Heat PC. Armored Brigade 2 allows us to play NATO versus Soviet battles on the folded gap terrain using MIL 2525 symbology in 14 by 14 kilometer increments as you see on the screen before you. We can toggle on color scale DTED data and toggle on a map closer to a CADRG style map that many 35 Foxes should be familiar with. Zooming in, we can see the topographic lines, building markings like a 1 to 25,000 scale tactical map, roads, and other features. But more than that, we can rotate and zoom within a three-dimensional simulation to compare how maps and their digital information can stand up to actual terrain conditions. Meanwhile, Gunner Heat PC takes us into the world of small unit operations and weapons analysis, with an interactive tactical map that helps us replicate Blue Force Tracker and analog 1 to 25,000 skill sets. We'll get to experience what terrain looks like on the map and then maneuver across it in T-72s, BTRs, Bradleys, and Abrams. So in our next terrain analysis tutorial video, we mix stale PowerPoints with simulation gameplay to define the operational environment and highlight some of the common mistakes we make with digital and analog maps in understanding terrain, all in anticipation of a Soviet-equipped motorized regiment clashing against a NATO brigade combat team. We look forward to seeing you there. Take care, and God bless.